Then to introduce our guest, Alex Lehman, to speak at the federal level. So thank you, Linda. Yes, please. And let me just put that there. Clear these things.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
So it's Repro.
Thank you.
That means that we're going to be, we're fortunate this evening to have a speaker with us from the National Council of Jewish Women, who sponsors Repro Shabbat. Urged us to, advocate for a law that would have given grants to reproductive health providers to enable them to provide reproductive health services to all comers, regardless of what their insurance status was. That bill was passed by the General Assembly, signed into law by the governor. The state was developing, yes, don't get too excited. The state was developing all of the policies and regulations, and then on January 20th, 2025, remember what happened that day? Department of Health and Human Services sued the state of Maryland to stop the program, saying it was illegal. So the program has not been implemented. Despite our advocacy, it's still hung up in the courts. I suggest that you reach out to your federal legislators and urge them to fight back against this because of its implications. So this year, there's always another year, there's always another General Assembly. We have, if you're interested, SB 1189, and those of you who are not nerds like me, I can show you how to go on the Maryland General Assembly website and search a bill. But this particular bill would help codify the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, EMTALA, so that people presenting in emergency rooms and urgent care centers with a pregnancy-related emergency would have to be treated and stabilized, that they could not be transferred out unless there was some really stellar reason. And so it is taking this law and putting it into Maryland's law specifically around pregnancy-related emergencies. We've heard stories about what happened in Texas and other states where women were not treated properly. So that's the big law, but that it's not been heard yet. But if you're interested, it's SB 1189. Now, there are also a whole slate of bills, mostly from Republican legislators in Annapolis, that will roll back protections to the 60s. Basically, those bills come up every year. They're usually very heavily promoted through conservative causes, but they haven't passed yet. They have to get out of committee. With a dominant Democratic legislature, that's not likely to happen. So I wanted to just give you an up-to-date on that, and to give you a little bit of an intro to our speaker this evening. As I said, she comes from the National Council of Jewish Women, which is the oldest Jewish feminist civil rights organization in the United States and probably the world. They fight for the rights of women, children, and families throughout the U.S. There are 250,000 of us who volunteer and advocate at NCJW. I encourage you to get involved. We have a very active advocacy program. And Repro Shabbat came out of a recognition that we have to raise awareness of the Jewish roots of our advocacy. We do this because we are Jews. It's not because we are on the right or the left, but because it is a Jewish value. Reproductive justice is a Jewish value. So I'm happy to introduce Alex Lehman. She leads the Reproductive Health, Rights, and Justice Policy portfolio at NCJW, where she serves as a lobbyist, a federal lobbyist, and supports strategic initiatives, litigation, legislation, and community mobilization. That's why she's here tonight. She has previously worked to advance abortion access and gender equity at organizations including Reproductive Freedom for All, which was called NARAL Pro-Choice America, the UN Foundation, the International Crisis Group, and at the U.S. House of Representatives. She is a graduate of Brown University, and she currently lives in D.C., but she calls New York City her hometown. So I'd like to introduce Alex. Please come up, and she's going to tell us where we stand at this federal level, what we can do, what we should be doing. Thanks.
Shabbat Shalom. Oh, microphone's on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda, for that introduction, and thank you all for having me here tonight. It really is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all. As mentioned, my name is Alex Lehman. I work for National Council of Jewish Women, which, as Linda shared, is our country's oldest Jewish feminist civil rights organization. Now, since 1893, NCJW has been fighting for women, children, and families through a combination of legislative advocacy and education, strategic litigation, and community mobilization. I help bring these efforts to Capitol Hill as a lobbyist, where I work to advance our reproductive health, rights, and justice policy goals. But throughout NCJW's history, the fight for bodily autonomy and access to reproductive health care has really been at the heart and the forefront of our work. Over a century ago, we helped found some of the first birth control clinics in the US, and in the decades following, worked to craft and pass legislation that enshrined access to reproductive health care and that advanced gender equity. And now tonight we continue our annual tradition of Repro Shabbat, where we, along with 2,500 other congregations and communities around the country, are coming together to read Parshat Mishpatim, which is the Torah portion that undergirds our Jewish belief in abortion access. So tonight we will ground ourselves in Jewish teaching, we'll find comfort, joy, and community, and recommit ourselves to this ongoing fight for bodily autonomy. Because, frankly, right now, we could really use that. So we find ourselves in a uniquely challenging moment. I don't need to tell you all this. We see ICE agents running rampant in the streets and our neighbors fearing for their lives and well-being. The decimation of our federal agencies, the rule of law, the power of truth. As we face an affordability crisis, our healthcare infrastructure has been deliberately eroded to exacerbate inequalities. Civil liberties are in peril, and our very democracy is under attack. But in times such as these, our Jewish texts and teachings can provide a playbook of sorts. As discussed and even sung during tonight's service, our faith instructs us that time is not linear. Rather, its cycles, rhythms, and rituals function as more of a spiral. Our collective memory grounds us and propels us forward. We've been here before, and we know the way through. So in that vein tonight, I invite you to join me in looking back as we pave our path forward. Indeed, in 2022, when the Supreme Court, in the Dobbs decision, overturned the constitutional right to abortion, it functioned as a time machine of sorts, not a good one. So in just one moment, half a century of precedent of protections were erased. And what we've seen in the years since is that now safe and vital abortion care has become virtually inaccessible to the millions of people who need it. Right now, 20 states fully ban or restrict abortion care earlier in pregnancy than the standard set by Roe. And 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in the United States, that's nearly 23 million, live in a state where abortion is out of reach. We also know that these bans and these targeted restrictive policies have a disproportionate impact on the most marginalized communities who already face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. It doesn't stop there. The Dobbs decision has opened the floodgates for the courts to re-examine whether other fundamental freedoms are up for debate: the right to contraception, the right to fertility treatments, gender-affirming care, the right to marry whomever you love. And hostile lawmakers are continuing to intensify their attacks on our healthcare and attempt new strategies to strip away our bodily autonomy and dismantle our personal freedoms. The stakes have never been higher. So, how do we fight back? We need new tools in our toolkit, and this is where religious freedom comes into play. For too long, the religious Christian right has monopolized and weaponized faith to restrict access to reproductive health care. Indeed, many of the bans I mentioned are grounded in the Christian theological perspective of when life begins. But our faith says differently. We'll explore that with this week's Parsha. 83% of Jews support access to abortion. We are not alone. In fact, majorities across most religious traditions say that abortion should be legal in most or all cases. But we must not let one extreme faith minority view dictate the rights for the rest of us. Reproductive freedom is religious freedom. So we'll dive in. This Shabbat, we read Parshat Mishpatim from the book of Exodus. Moses has just led the Israelites out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, where they received the 10 Commandments. And now God is relaying a more robust set of laws to Moses to govern this new society. So this portion largely comprises of civil laws, seemingly mundane, at times even bizarre or problematic, such as the rules pertaining to the treatment of slaves. However, these commandments all seek to create structure and order out of the chaos and complexities of daily life. And as we revisit our sacred text with fresh eyes, we must take in its lessons and apply them to our current moment. Personally, I read the Torah similarly to the way one might approach the U.S. Constitution, as a living, breathing document. So, in doing so, I hope you'll indulge me in also borrowing another concept used in legal interpretation, that of the penumbra. Bear with me. Derived from Latin, pene, almost, and umbra, shadow, penumbra is often translated as half-light. The astronomically minded among us might recall this term as describing the partial shadow cast during an eclipse. But in legal context, penumbral reasoning is used to derive rights implied from constitutional guarantees rather than explicitly stated. So, for example, in the landmark 1965 case Griswold v. Connecticut, the court ruled to overturn a state restriction on contraceptive use for married couples by inferring that several amendments in the Bill of Rights created zones, or penumbras, of a right to privacy, and thus protecting intimate decision-making. And 8 years later, when Roe v. Wade was decided, the privacy doctrine from Griswold, established by that penumbral groundwork, was directly applied and expanded, encompassing one's decision to access abortion care. An imperfect but deeply important foundation. Half-light, in the shadows, envisioning what could be or what should be. Now, I implore you to bring a similar mentality to this week's Parsha. While we point to it as undergirding our Jewish belief in abortion access, it might not strike you at first glance as the most rousing endorsement. The answers lie in the penumbra, in the in-betweens, in what we derive and how we build on it and apply it and let it guide us. So in Exodus 21, verses 22 to 23, a hypothetical ensues in which two men are fighting and accidentally collide with a pregnant woman, causing her to miscarry. The consequence? Financial reparations. However, if the woman were to suffer a fatal injury, capital punishment is ordered, a life for a life. What does this tell us? From this retributive justice system that is built on strict proportionality, we derive that the fetus does not have the same legal status as a person. The end of a pregnancy is incommensurate with the end of a life, and the pregnant person's health and well-being is paramount. Why does this matter? The concept of fetal personhood, so this idea that a fetus, embryo, or fertilized egg possesses the same constitutional rights and legal protections as a living human being, is strategically and maliciously wielded by abortion opponents to restrict access to essential health care. When codified in law and bolstered by unconstitutional invocations of Christian theological sentiment, medical providers have their hands tied. They are rendered unable to deliver critical care, and pregnant people are stripped of bodily autonomy and agency, which too often endangers their health, well-being, and even life. Now, our rabbinic tradition deepened in the Mishnah and Talmud crystallizes our negation of fetal personhood and clearly affirms that when pregnancy poses a threat to health and life, abortion is not only permitted, but even required. The Jewish concept of pekuach nefesh, saving a life, overrides virtually every other religious commandment. Protecting existing life comes first, and the life of the pregnant person takes precedence. Judaism also deeply values the wisdom of medical experts and affirms their ability to freely provide life-saving care. Our faith also instills individuals with autonomy. We are the ultimate authority over our health and well-being. According to the Talmud, as rabbis discuss who might be sufficiently sick so as to be exempt from the Yom Kippur fast, one postulates that even if 100 external experts were to determine a patient capable of fasting, the patient alone makes that determination. If they feel they are too sick, we defer to them, we listen to them, we let them eat. Similarly, with reproductive health care, these important and private decisions deserve to be made by the individual in consultation with trusted medical experts and without political interference. You might be asking, what is our alternative to fetal personhood? Judaism teaches that life begins at first breath, as oxygen in the lungs allows the soul to enter the body. So at this particular moment, facing all that we know we're up against, let us collectively breathe new life into this Jewish movement for abortion access. At NCJW, we will continue to take this fight to Congress, working to educate lawmakers and pass legislation that supports reproductive health. We will continue to fight in the courts. We will file amicus briefs to amplify our unique perspective in cases related to religious freedom, reproductive rights, and health care. We will continue to fight by mobilizing our advocates on the ground, around the country, building and strengthening grassroots coalitions, whether they're Jewish, interfaith, or secular, and we will tell the story and engage congregations through our Rabbis for Repro network. We do this work in community. It unites us in shared purpose, it builds our power, and can be a source of joy. And I would invite you all to join us, but you already are a vital part of this movement by being here tonight and hopefully taking these words to heart. There are so many ways to take action in your community, as we heard from Linda, to make your voices heard and to ensure that Maryland remains a safe haven for reproductive freedom. And if you feel so inclined, I also brought an advocacy opportunity here tonight for you all to participate in a postcard campaign we're sending to the FDA to ensure that medication abortion is kept safe and available. Half-Light. This movement is built on generations and generations of people who came before us. I'm motivated every day by the sacrifices, efforts, and dreams of the Jewish women in my family, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, after whom I was named. But now we are all tasked with continuing this fight in the hopes that those who come after us are able to inherit a world with full bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. That is our moral obligation, and this is our sacred task. Pirkei Avot, the final book of the Mishnah, instructs us, quote, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." There's a lot to do, but we're in it together, and our movement will not cease until all people are free to control their own lives, bodies, and futures. Judaism also teaches us that we are partners in an ongoing creation, working to build a world of wholeness, compassion, and justice. And Shabbat is our weekly glimpse into what that finished world might look like. This week, I've been thrilled to see that the temperature is getting milder, the days are getting longer, and the ice, or shall I say snowcrete, is melting. And we rest and restore ourselves in the shadows and prepare for what's to come. The knowledge that spring is right around the corner, and with it, rebirth and rejuvenation, strengthens us to make it through the cold winter. Because we've been here before, and we know the way through. Half-Light. We're in a moment that feels dark, but we know that brightness is on the other side. Because after all, sunlight has been said to be the best disinfectant. Before I close, a final note. Last night, I had the pleasure of attending a new exhibit at the National Gallery of Art, featuring a collection of Australian Indigenous paintings. The exhibit was titled All the Stars We Cannot See, inspired by particular depictions of the cosmos containing crisscrossing lines, our known universe, and a jubilant array of celestial dots to represent the magnitude of what might not yet be visible to us, but whose presence and depth transcend time and space and are with us because all are fundamentally connected. And our tradition teaches similarly that our past, present, and future are inextricably intertwined, that those who came before us will show us the way forward, and that together, with faith, persistence, and hope, we can build a brighter future. So on this Repro Shabbat, let us draw on the penumbral teachings of Mishpatim to collectively envision Judaism's expansive vision of justice, of a world made whole and cast in full light. Shabbat Shalom.